بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآل الطاهرين. ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. We had discussed how there are different ways of purifying different layers of our existence. We went through many examples. And if you recall, when we went through each of the 5 senses, we discussed there how one has to purify oneself. But we also have other inner dimensions within ourselves, which they too require cleansing. In this treatise that Allame Hassanzadeh Amuli Rahmatullah alayh, it's called the Treatise of Unity, Risale Wahdat, as didgah from the angle of the Arif, the Gnostic, and the Hakim, the wise. Although Arif here is a particular irfan pertaining to the likes of Ibn Arabi, and the Hakim, the Theosopher, is pertaining to the likes of Mullah Sadra, how these two look at unity. They're both acceptable, but there are different depths. Within this treatise, 3 pages of it is in relation to the levels of purification. And I read from that treatise a few days ago. The next level that he touches upon is how to purify the faculty of khiyal, very loosely translated as the imaginative faculty. And we'll talk about that tonight a bit, inshallah. If you recall, with the 5 senses, for example, the faculty of vision, the faculty of touch, smell, and so on and so forth. These 5, the term faculty here is important. One has to realize, what are we referring to? Because at the end of the day, it's a set of nerves linked to the brain and the central nervous system, for example. And what these nerves do, or what they don't do for sure, is they don't perceive the seeing, the hearing, the smelling. The seeing, the hearing, the smelling, and so on and so forth, they were immaterial realities. What the physical things are doing, the nerves and the brain and so on and so forth, they're just instruments to allow immaterial sensory perceptions to arise. So they just relay information. There's no perception attributed to the 5 sets of senses themselves. The nerves, for example, and so on and so forth. However, all these different nervous systems which are connected to the brain, what they lead to, what they are an instrument to, are immaterial perceptions. Those immaterial perceptions from long ago, prophets like Aristotle and Plato. I say prophets because we have a hadith, Ayatollah Hassanzadeh has affirmed them, that they gave the term of sensus communis, which in the technical Farsi language, they call it hisse mushtarak. And this hisse mushtarak, this communal sense, is something which is the holder of all those 5 sensory perceptions. It's a dimension of the soul, it's immaterial, and all the sensory immaterial perceptions, this perceives them. So it's this sense which sees. It's this sense which hears, and so on and so forth. Not the physical ear, or the nerves, or the brain. They're just instruments. The actual immaterial perceiving is attributed to the sensus communis, as they call it, hiss mushtarak, whatever you want to call it. And this is, although Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh in this treatise hasn't mentioned it elsewhere, he's talked about it in his commentary to Ibn Sina's Shifa, for example. He talks a lot about it. But when this too has to be cleansed, now maybe he didn't mention the purification of it in this treatise because in reality it would be the same as how to purify the faculties of hearing, seeing, touch, and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, this is where it's all being accumulated. This is where it's all accumulating in the hiss mushtarak, in the sensus communis, so to speak. So when you want to cleanse this faculty of the communal sense, which holds all our sensory perceptions, how to purify it? You purify it in the same way that we had discussed with those different sense faculties. We went through them one by one. And so, for example, reading the Quran, hearing the Quran, touching the Quran, all these help in relation to purifying this particular hiss mushtarak, so to speak. But the point is this, that this sense is accumulating a lot of perceptions here. It gets out of hand. You watch one television program for 1 hour, Allah knows how much you're accumulating in this sense. So the potential to gather and accumulate a lot of garbage one is susceptible to this, and therefore one would be polluting and contaminating oneself. So one has to think about how to compensate. In every 24-hour period of time, if we imagine one sleeps for 8 hours, for example, and one works, or in our case, studies for 8 hours, and another 8 hours, it may be with the family and other recreational activities or work or whatever. Here, okay, the 8 hours sleep, let's call that neutral for now. But then we have another 16 hours. What are we going to do in those 16 hours? The recreational activities with the family and so on and so forth, it's not as if it's all done unlawfully. And so that contributes to the contamination. It's not haram. But whatever you do, be it with your family, friends, at the workplace, leisure, when it's on a par with being attentive to the dunya, you're contaminating yourself. Even in the seminaries, when you're studying, depending on why you're studying and what your objectives are, even studying the seminary sciences, it's all being attentive to the dunya. So given those 8 hours, assuming they're neutral, you have 16 hours here of contaminating oneself. Because you keep on constantly attentive to the dunya. So here one has to have a program. Now, I don't want to pretend to give you a program or whatever you, alhamdulillah, you all have access to ustads, but those of you who saw and benefited from Ayatollah Bahjat, rahmatullah alayhi, he was always in a state of dua and dhikr. He would go to the haram every morning. People would surround him and bother him, the likes of me. 20, 30, 40 people surrounding him, sitting in an area in the haram. And he's not speaking with anyone. He's just saying adhkar, and we're just all infatuated with his presence, or in his presence. Look, these are people that we've seen. The point is, these 16 hours, you also have to have a program. One part of the program is tuning your intentions. So at least at the workplace, you're working for Allah or studying for Allah. It's not an easy feat. It's not something easy to do. But that would help to lower the degree of contamination which one is polluting oneself with. But at least have assigned parts of the day where you say adhkar. And even if it's an academic regurgitation of the different adhkar, be attentive to the meaning. Okay, we're not saying ittaqullah, the huzuri taqwa that we talked about before. That takes some time. But at least levels of taqwa before the huzuri taqwa. At least perceive of noble things, noble attributes. 1 hour a day, for example, of adhkar. But be in a quiet place. This idea of walking on the street with a tasbih and saying adhkar loud, most mentors are against such a thing, as far as I know. And the thing is, you're walking, you're doing several things, and at the same time you're saying adhkar. You can't focus on both of them. For example, if you're washing the dishes, you're washing the dishes. It's going to be difficult to say adhkar with that huzur qalb. Or these things are difficult to do. One has to assign a period of time, reading the Quran, saying adhkar, and then having ikhlas in one's actions to the best of one's capacity, at least trying to lower down that 16 hours of, dunya, which one is taking in every day. Try to lower that, lessen it. And here, the thing is, it's very difficult. The dunya, for example, you want to just move to another house. Look how much dunya one has to drown oneself in. Especially if the other spouse doesn't work with you either way. Otherwise, I remember Muhammad Shah Abadi. He was the elder son of Muhammad Ali Shah Abadi, who was Imam's mentor in Irfan. I benefited a few months in his presence. And once he had to move house, it was very simple. The whole family and him, they moved house. It didn't take more than a day. The curtains have to be like this, how many carpets, this has to be like that, nothing. It was such a very easy transition. And this showed everyone, the students, that there's no attentiveness to the dunya. But what kind of taps do we have to have? What kind of lavatory do we have to have? This one has to be careful with these things. Anyway, the point is, with this hissa mushtarak, which is being fed so much information, immaterial sense perceptions, that being the fabric of who we are immaterial entities in reality. Here, you're building yourself. And every day that passes, you have to be careful. What's gone won't be repaired. If you remember, immaterial realities, once established, they're there eternally. They won't decompose. They won't change. It's there. And that is something important we have to. And so when no 2 days have to be the same, yes, one interpretation is that, okay, don't sin. When you don't sin, okay, you're strengthening yourself by not sinning the second day. That itself is an improvement, because now it's 2 days you haven't sinned. But another way at looking at this, and another interpretation, is that do things that lessen the garbage that you're feeding yourself in. One of those things which I humbly recommend, especially those in the West, is activism. Being active for Allah's sake. Giving your wealth, health, life for Allah's sake. Be active when you're wherever you live, but for Allah's sake. Sometimes a center, for example, in one country has been treated unfairly by the government of that country. Then Muslims, let's say this in England, a center's been closed down for whatever reason. Then Muslims in Canada go outside the British Embassy in Ottawa, and they protest. That's a good thing. We have to commend that kind of action. It's very noble of them. It's much more noble than someone in Iran going outside the British Embassy. This is good too, but that takes a lot of guts to do such a thing. They're not scared. It doesn't matter if they're not given a mortgage. It doesn't matter to them if they're community people who are crippled spiritually and are leading communities don't like them or speak against them. This is important. These kind of activities involve yourselves in. This helps with purification of the Hiss Mushtarak too. The more you're active, the better. But a more pressing issue that is continuing is the burning of the Quran. And what Muslims in the West are doing about this. You may have realized recently Ayatollah Khamenei also has given his stance on the issue. And he says the most severest of punishment has to be given to such people. When we have polluted, non-religious, very perverted but rich people sponsoring, leading, being the main access of any given center in the West, what's going to come out is going to be a very perverted mentality, and our children are going to be nurtured with that perverted mentality. Anyway, I've diverted a bit, but the point is, activism is important because you're sacrificing yourself, at least your time, for Allah's sake, your wealth for Allah's sake, ultimately your life for Allah's sake. Then we come to the khiyal, the imaginative faculty. And this imaginative faculty has two functions. One is what the census communist perceives, the imaginative faculty stores. You see, sometimes you want to say something and you forget something, a particular thing. If that particular thing was in the census communist, you should say it immediately. There shouldn't be a barrier because it's before you in actuality. The fact that sometimes it takes time, you have to be attentive to something and then recollect, shows there's another dimension of the soul which is doing the storing of this particular faculty. And so here it's important what you store. You don't want to store garbage within you. But another function of this imaginative faculty, the khiyal, so to speak, is that it pictures what the intellect perceives. Now the intellect perceives immaterial, purely immaterial truths. And then the imaginative faculty converts that immaterial truth into semi-immaterial pictures. For example, sometimes even in any science, there's an abstract principle of a given science, then you come and convert it into mental pictures before then speaking about it and uttering what you want to say about it. This converting into pictures, pure immaterial truth, is another function of the khiyal. And here, this is what happens in dreams, for example, where when you sleep, you detach from the physical realm. Be you Muslim or non-Muslim, you detach. This detachment is an important key. There are many ways people can detach from the physical realm. One is taking hallucinatory drugs, for example. They detach too. They see things. Excess, severe trauma can cause one just to detach from everything. Well, they're awake, but they're so traumatized, they detach from everything. Spiritual wayfaring is the safest and best way of detaching from the physical realm, but sleeping is also one way of detaching. You sleep, automatically you detach from the physical realm. Here, be you Muslim or non-Muslim, you're now going to be a recipient of metaphysical truths. And here, the aql is a recipient to many supra-immaterial truths, and you have access to them. And then your faculty of imagination, or the imaginative faculty, the khiyal, converts that which your aql perceives from realms beyond the aql, and then converts them into pictures. And we call that dreaming, even though technically dreaming is the hunting down of those pure immaterial truths. But it's a common mistake made. And then after this conversion, we see these pictures. And we say we dreamt of X, Y, Z. So this is an important function. It's to do with this imaginative faculty. And the picture that it gives of that purely pictureless immaterial truth that one has received is on a par with and corresponds, the picture corresponds with the immaterial truth. For example, if you see a cat in your dreams, it corresponds with some kind of stealing. You see? If you, for example, see a predator in your dreams, yes, these are all you. It's all you. It's nothing from, you're not seeing something outside. These are all things you're seeing within. You've become a predator. If you see snakes, for example, you have a lot of enemies. Now, that is a result of your own doing. You have to correct yourself. And there are many things which I've noted a few examples here. For example, with a fox, they say it's a deception that you have, and it's manifested or it's been converted into a fox, for example. If you see water in your dreams, it's a sign of knowledge. Although sometimes it depends on the dreamer. If they're, for example, a seminary student, seeing water would be indicative of some kind of knowledge. If you're a businessman, it would be indicative of some kind of, monetary sustenance or of that kind. If you see yourself in the nude, it's indicative of taqwa. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you see, for example, pigs, there's some haram consumption that you're affected with. and so on and so forth. All these different. Sometimes because of an inner need that you have. For example, you're in a very cold place. That also has an effect. Your inside requires heat, for example. You need warmth. That can have an effect on the dream too. You see a burning light, for example. And so these things, the purer one is, the more layers of existence one purifies, the more correct the converting from the intellectual realm to the imaginative realm, the more correct the pictures that you see will be. Sometimes it's messed up. There are two things which mess up one's dream. One is lying. Ayatollah Jawadi Amali Hafidahullah says, if you're a liar, it's going to be very difficult, because if lying is ingrained within you, the imaginative faculty is going to lie. So here, the interpreter of the dream is going to have a very difficult time in making the interpretation. Also, holding bad opinion of others. Most of our bad dreams, according to the Urafa, messed up dreams, is because of having bad opinion of others. And then Ayatollah Hassan Zawda Omri, in this treatise, when it comes to purifying the imaginative faculty, he says you have to purify it from wrong beliefs, lowly perceptions, and from its activity in the domain of amal and amani. Amal and amani are two kinds of wishing. When the wishing is backed by 70-80% of you actualizing that wish, 70 to 80% of its preliminaries is ready, it's done. And now that final 20, you want it, they call that amal with a hamza. It's plural being amal. But amani is wishful thinking of a much higher level, where only 20%, for example, of the preliminaries of that which you want are set and established. 80% of the preliminaries are yet to be actualized, and you're wishing for something. This is amani. In the Quran, there's mention of amani. It's in relation to people from the Ahlul Kitab and even Muslims who think they're going to heaven. They say, if you cry for Imam Hussein, one drop, you'll get shafa'ah for heaven. I've talked about shafa'ah a lot, and I think I've even here in previous years, both Imam Khomeini's stance on shafa'ah, Allama Tabatabayi's. I gave 13, 14 lectures. They're all readily available online. I don't want to repeat those things. But this idea that we're going to go and just because of a tear, Imam Hussein, this is rubbish. It's wishful thinking. Crying a tear for Imam Hussein, they say it forgives everything. Yes, it does. You're forgiven everything on the outside. But is your batin cleansed? Wallahi, it's not. You're still the same polluted person. From a fiqhi level, all your sins are forgiven. On the day of Arafah, ask for forgiveness, all your sins are forgiven. It's true. On the fiqhi level. But for the batini level to be cleared and cleansed, do you think with just one tear that will solve it? Of course it doesn't. The Urafa don't accept it. It takes a process of incorporating Tawheed within you until you reach that batini cleansing of the self. See, these things make one complacent. Even Imam's mentor, Muhammad Ali Shah Abadi, Rahmatullah alayhima, he said this shafa is making us Shias complacent. One is because we haven't understood it, And secondly, we think we are the chosen people. And then in one verse of the Holy Quran, which I've noted somewhere, it's chapter 4, verse 123. The previous verse it speaks about heaven. In this verse, it says Laysa. The subject of Laysa is heaven, but it's not mentioned here. You get it from the context of the previous verse. Laysa ba'amaniyakum. Paradise is not through your wishful thinking. This wishful thinking you have in relation to Imam Hussein, the love of Imam Hussein, we love Imam Hussein. Until you give your life for Imam Hussein. You give your wealth for Imam Hussein. Yes, that's important. You have to that love has to be manifested on all layers of your existence, and ultimately giving your life for him. Laysa bi'amaniyakum. This paradise is not through this wishful thinking of yours. Wala amaniya ahlil kitab. And neither it's paradise isn't through the wishful thinking how the Jews and Christians think. The Jews say heaven, all Jews will go to heaven. Everything is there for us. We are the chosen people. We are this, we are that. Christians the same. The Quran though says, the same verse, مَا يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا يُجْزَ بِهِ. You do wrong, you're going to be recompensed. You are your actions. You are your knowledge. If your knowledge is fasid and corrupt and wrong, and your actions are minimal, you've lost the plot. You can't survive. And then here, Ayatollah Hassan says you have to cleanse yourself from incorrect beliefs. Even Tawheed is understood wrongly. That once upon a time there's nothing, non-existence. Non-existence and Allah. Then Allah comes and creates something, existing something, from nothing, from non-existence. Look, it's contradictory in terms here. What do you mean? And those who give a beginning to creation, it's wrong. It's limited, it's deficient, all these are wrong. The list keeps on continuing. One's notion of evil, we're Zoroastrian, how we understand evil. Not a Tawheedi monotheist. How we understand prophets, we're Christian. Many of us, how we understand prophets. We say the prophet sinned. He abandoned the best action. That's what the Christians say. So where is Islam? And then when this census communists, you keep on collecting garbage. Then you keep on storing it. When you want to have a worldview and aqa'id, that garbage is not going to let you. It's not going to let you have a pure worldview. One has to be careful here. A worldview which enters your heart, not just an academic worldview that anyone can go and learn, even a kafir can go and learn. But believing in Tawheed, entering your heart, believing in the station of prophethood, it entering your heart, and so on and so forth. And so one requires a qualified teacher. They say teach your child a bit of logic, a bit of mathematics, a bit of philosophy, a bit of irfan. Let them nurture themselves, let them grow, let them be susceptible to a pure, a good worldview, a Tawheedi worldview. So my time's a bit limited here, but also in relation to having bad opinion of others, inshallah, maybe I'll speak more about that later, inshallah. Okay. Tonight is attributed to Ali Akbar, alayhi salam. On Thursdays, 20 years ago, on Thursdays, at Imam's house in Yakhchal Qazi, there was someone who's passed away now. His name was Ali Panah Ishtahardi. And he attended the ethics lessons of Imam Khomeini. So many of the things he recollected, he would share with, and it was always full, everyone, and many people were there. He said that Imam said that the fourth Imam was supposed to be Ali Akbar, alayhi salam. And there was a change in destiny. Now someone may say, but what about the tablet of Jabir? It was given to a long time ago. All the names of the Imams were mentioned. Yes, it was mentioned. But it says Ali ibn al-Husayn. Now, which Ali wasn't specified. Although it was known, but Ali ibn al-Husayn was mentioned on the tablet. And Imam, all his sons were called Ali. Imam Khomeini rahmatullah said Ali Akbar was supposed to be. And there are contextual indicators to this. He was the oldest, but that's not the be-all and end-all. It's just one indicator. But his knowledge was very high. Just looking like the Prophet doesn't just mean looking like the Prophet. He has the inside of the Prophet. There's a unity between body and soul. Not anyone can look like the Prophet. You need a particular batini dimension for it to manifest a subtle physical manifestation. To speak like the Prophet, to act like the Prophet, the level was very high. But they say Bada was actualized and there was a change in destiny here. I remember one year, during the first 10 days of Muharram, I was here for Dhikr Musibat. I read the poems of Ummane Thamani. And with Ali Akbar, he mentioned something. That when Ali Akbar came back, returned to the tents after fighting for a period of time, and said that Al-Atash Qatalani, that this thirst is killing me, it wasn't a physical thirst. Okay? It was a thirst of disclosing pure Tawheed at a level which people weren't ready for. It was a thirst of ma'rifah. That's one point. Now, that was a poem. But Umman Samani was an arif. And he has his background is very important. And these poems were a result of visions that he had. But it's not revelation. During the imposed war against Iran, we had many shuhada. Many of them wrote a will. Now this was on Iranian television. You may have heard of Professor, I've forgotten his name now, Rahimpur. Hassan Rahimpur Azghadi, yes. He had access to many letters which still haven't been published. And then he read one particular letter of one of the shuhada. So Samani had a vision. This shaheed, Allah knows what he saw in the battlefield. But he wrote this in his will. He said, Wallahi, those who say Ali Akbar, alayhi salam, returned for physical water, Wallahi, they're lying. Because they see this as lowering the status of Ali Akbar. It's defamatory. What do you mean? The children dying of thirst and now you're returning to give me physical water? He was supposed to be the fourth Imam. See, this kind of thing we can't accept. Anyway, I'll just read a few. All the companions had been martyred, only the family members were left. And they decided the previous night to die with honor, with all their might. And who was the first to enter into battle? It was Ali Akbar. Some say he was 27 years of age, some say 18. And suffice it to say that he was a reflection of the Holy Prophet's beauty and manifested the Prophet's morals, sublime temperament, and his manner of talk. He looked so similar to the Holy Messenger that many were dumbstruck, saying, "Is this the Prophet coming forward?" He was ma'soom without a doubt, and he was supposed to be the fourth Imam. Ali Akbar was about to leave for combat. His departure from the tents was too burdensome for the women and children to tolerate. They couldn't bear parting with him. They all surrounded him and said, "Irham ghurbatana," have mercy on this total loneliness and isolation were you to go. La taqata lana ala faraqik, we can't bear becoming separated from you. Ali Akbar alayhi salam could no longer stay though. His duty was to assist Allah's proof on earth, whose blood was sought by those animals. He asked permission from Imam Hussein alayhi salam to enter the battlefield and went. On leaving for combat, Imam Hussein's eyes were filled with tears. With the others, Imam Hussein said, "No, there's no need to go." With Ali Akbar said, "Go." He didn't resist at all. He couldn't control his not crying. He turned towards Umar ibn Sa'd and said, "Ma laka, what's wrong with you? Qata'allahu rahimak, may Allah end your kinship. Kama qata'ta rahimi, as you have put an end to my kinship and my children, you've killed them. Walam tahfad qarabati, and you haven't preserved the dignity that I have as being akin to the Holy Messenger. Lam tahfad, you haven't preserved qarabati, my being akin, min Rasulillah, to the Holy Messenger." And then he further cursed him and said, "Sallata alayka may yadhbahuka ala firashik," and may Allah assign someone to dominate over you and slaughter you when you're in bed. Because after Karbala, Umar ibn Sa'd, wherever he would go, he would be isolated. People would just isolate, he was very lonely. And this has a psychological effect when no one is ready to socialize or come and speak with you. Everyone would just say, "He's the killer of Imam Hussein. He's the killer of Imam Hussein." And he was so lonely, it had such a psychological effect that he wouldn't exit the house after a period of time. And he would stay in this house, and ultimately in his house, in his bed, Mukhtar had killed him. So this was a prophecy which the Imam made here. When the Imam is saying a dua in relation to people or a curse, it's going to happen. It's not a case of the Imam wanting something from Allah. No. The Imam's words are God's words. These are going to happen. Not that they may happen or they won't happen. Then Imam Hussein alayhi salam said in supplication, "Allahumma ashhad ala ha'ula." Oh Allah, be witness over these people. فَقَدْ بَرَزَ إِلَيْهِمْ أَشْبَهُ النَّاسِ بِرَسُولِكَ مُحَمَّدٍ خَلْقًا وَخُلْقًا وَمَنْطِقًا. Someone is approaching them who is most like and similar to your Holy Messenger, appearance-wise, morals-wise, rationality-wise. وَكُنَّا إِذَا اشْتَقْنَا إِلَىٰ رُؤْيَةِ نَبِيِّكَ نَظَرْنَا إِلَيْهِ. Whenever we desired to see the appearance of the Holy Messenger, you would always turn to Ali Akbar and see him. Allahumma famna'hum barakatil ard. Oh Allah, suppress them of the blessings of the earth. Wa farriqhum tafriqa, and affect them with disunity and discord. Wa mazhiqhum tamziqa, and eliminate all traces of peace and harmony from them. Waj'alhum tara'iqa qidada, don't allow them to progress with any uniformity. Wala turdil wulata anhum abada, and never let their leaders be satisfied with them. فَإِنَّهُمْ دَعَوْنَا لِيَنْصُرُونَا. They called upon us, they called us, so they invited us to come and help us. They promised us to help us. ثُمَّ أَدَوْا عَلَيْنَا يُقَاتِلُونَ. However, they rose against us and went in war and killed us. Here, the elite of the army sent many cavaliers against Ali Akbar, but no one succeeded in combat against him. After a short period of time, 120 soldiers, according to some reports, had perished. Then Ali Akbar alayhi salam returned to his father. Said, Ya Abata, oh my dear, Al-Atash qad qatalani. This thirst, it's killing me. وَالثِّقْلُ الْحَدِيدِ أَجْهَدَنِي. The heaviness of the armor is bothering me. But as I said, we have a hadith from Imam Baqir alayhi salam. He said the burdens, the pain that the male members of Bani Hashim underwent were on a par with a simple pinching of the skin of the hand. Something like that. There was no pain. Imam Baqir alayhi salam. But this is a pain of a much higher level. The thirst for ma'rifat. Give me something. Quench this thirst of ma'rifat. I can't tolerate it anymore. The dunya is heavy upon me. I can't tolerate this. Give me something to drink. Then he says, فَهَلْ إِلَوْ شَرْبَةٍ مِنَ الْمَاءِ سَبِيلٌ. Is there any way you can give me something to drink so I can put it down my throat, away inside me? Here, in some maqtals, there's mentioned that Imam Hussein placed his ring, although not too many maqtals mention it, but it is mentioned, places his ring in the mouth of Ali Akbar. And if this is true, but the interpretation, they say it's because they wanted saliva to accumulate in the mouth of Ali Akbar. That can't be the case here. But that ring, here the Imam was generating something within the batin of Ali Akbar. And some say Ali Akbar was on the process of exclaiming levels of Tawheed which people weren't ready to hear. And the ring of Hussein alayhi salam sealed his mouth so he doesn't, and just tolerates it a bit more. You've all heard of the I forgot the name now. Yes, sorry. The one who was saying An al-Haq and what faced him. Anyway, Imam Hussein's eyes were rolling with tears. With utmost sorrow, he then said, O son, soon you'll reunite with your grandfather, and he will quench your thirst for good. So this is a batini thirst. And on hearing this, Ali Akbar became rejuvenated, happy with rejoice, and went back. And the combat had continued, but then all of a sudden, from behind, someone threw a spear which pierced through Ali Akbar's back. And the animal then approached Ali Akbar and struck him so hard on the head with his sword that it had cut through his head up to his eyebrows. Here, Ali Akbar was no longer able to withstand all these different injuries, and before the enemy were coming towards him, by that time he fell forwards onto his horse, grasping the neck of the horse. The enemy realized now that he can't do anything. They came closer and closer. It was there that Ali Akbar then shouted, Alayka minni as-salam, ya Abu Abdullah. Gave his salam. Not many, we don't have too many definitive records that people would give such a salam. Alayka minni as-salam, ya Abu Abdullah. Hadha jaddi. Qad saqani bikasih. He saw the Holy Prophet. It wasn't a physical seeing. He saw the Holy Prophet. And the Holy Prophet quenched his thirst. Sharbatan la adma'u ba'daha. A drink by means of which
I'll never be thirsty again. وَهُوَ يَقُولُ, and then the Holy Messenger said, in the vision that Ali Akbar is having, إِنَّ لَكَ كَأْسًا مَذْخُورًا, that there's a tablet waiting for you, a goblet waiting for you, O Imam Hussein, for you to quench also. It's awaiting you. The enemies came closer and closer, and the way the Maqtal then describes it, they say, وَقَتَّأُوهُ بِسُيُوفِهِمْ إِرْبًا إِرْبًا. لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين.